Right, good evening and welcome to News Sources on this 7th day of May 2017. With just 61 days to the next general election, the country is in full campaign mode. Meanwhile, a countrywide nurses' strike continues into its 4th day. I am Julie Masiga. Before we start, let me introduce my guests. Right next to me is Dr. Nelly Bosire, who is the former chair of the Nairobi chapter of the Kenya Medical Practitioners and Dentists Union. Right next to her is Ibrahim Oruko, journalist. Right next to him there is new person on the show today, Sharon Cherambos, who is an intelligence and analysis consultant. And of course, right next to her, there is Duncan Hayamba, who's a senior political reporter right here at The Standard. Right now, the chair, IEBC chair is to announce the results of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission has now accused the High Court of creating a constitutional crisis in the August election over an April ruling that barred the commission from verifying presidential results from the constituencies. IEBC claims that the chair, Wafula Chebukati, is the only officer mandated to handle the declaration of the presidential election results.
Should ever ask that question, because that question is not a constitutional question, it is not a legal question, it is a political question.
The work of the chairperson is so simple. It's not about figures. At the end of all this is only one statutory instrument that is supposed to sign who has won. No numbers, no figures, just who is declared to be the president. It doesn't need to say he won by so much. The Electoral Commission, in the person of the chairman of the commission, then declare the result of the election in terms of who.
Right, so a court tussle, I don't think we should delve so much into the goings-on in the court. Of course, the Court of Appeal has today said that they will give the ruling on the 23rd of June. But I think the question here is, and maybe I'll start with you, Duncan, is should the results be announced at the constituency level or should they be announced, the presidential election results be announced at constituency or at the national level?
As per the Constitution, my little knowledge, I'm not a lawyer, but I think it's common knowledge that the chairman of IEBC is actually the returning officer for the presidential election. And therefore, it is proper that the results will be announced by the chair himself, because in that case, he can be held to account. But the problem is what I've gathered and what the opposition is saying. They are not saying that they are stopping anybody to announce the results at the national level. What they are saying is they want whatever will be captured by the returning officer at the constituency level, because the same officer will be giving results of member of parliament, woman rep, senator, governor. Then why not just conclude and give the same figures which everybody who is present can be able to document? Because at the end of it, the opposition says that they want to use that to compare with whatever the IEBC chair will be announcing at the end of the day.
All right. And as an intelligence and analysis consultant, Sharon, the IEBC is arguing on Section 136, I think, of the Constitution, which distinguishes between a general election and a presidential election, even though they happen on the same day. Yes. So do they have a point by saying that they should be allowed to verify those results and then announce them themselves at national level, or should be?
Well, I believe, like, just as he said, there's a lot of room there to discuss the various sections. But if you come to the nitty-gritty about it, I think the bottom line is the security of the results. And I think this is the underlying tone that a lot of people are failing to get, is there is a lot of anxiety in terms of whether the final results, whether they go to be tallied at national level, whether they will be representative of what is tallied at the county level. And I think that really is the elephant in the room. People are very anxious about a 2007, 2008 scenario. And that is essentially what I find to be the spirit of what a lot of people are counteracting with this argument. It's, do we want a situation where you're having your results coming from Garissa, going all the way to Nairobi, give or take, something happening en route, and if the court does rule in favor of Chebukati announcing the final presidential results and the tallying and the verification, which is very important in terms of credibility and transparency, then what needs to happen is there needs to be state machinery in place to ensure that by the time the votes are leaving the constituency level and getting to the final returning officer, who is the IEBC chair, that there is a system in place to ensure the security of votes.
Right.
Yeah.
Oruko, should we be anxious that somebody might play around with these votes as they travel from all parts of the country to Nairobi, or should we take IEBC at face value?
One, the first thing, I think this whole debate and the whole case is actually a waste of time. The things are very clear, but since we just like wasting time talking about things that don't exist, we are here because there are natural winners who must win, and you have natural losers who must lose. What are we discussing? We have spent so much time in this country talking about institutions, that let us respect institutions, right? And now in this instance, we are being told that an institution is a person called the chair. The same constitution will tell you presidential elections are conducted in the constituencies. The person conducting those elections is an agent of who? The IEBC.
Yes.
It happened in 2002 when the final results were announced at the constituency level.
Yes, but with the 2010 Constitution, Article 136, IEBC is arguing that the presidential election is distinct from the rest.
No,
So should
they're not
go with
arguing
the
that
same
way.
rules.
That's actually a wrong reading.
That is what they've argued in court
No,
today.
it's a wrong reading. That's what I'm telling you, they're a waste of time because even if he's the returning officer, he doesn't count the votes. Even if you go at the county level, there's a county returning officer who doesn't count. We are talking about declaration, right?
He wants to
that
verify.
the chairman, no, verify what? Was he there?
Dr. Nelly,
What
what
is
do you
he
think? Does he have a right to at least verify these votes?
Why? How?
I think what I agree with him is that we're really creating a circus around this whole issue. And if you ask me, I think the reason we're in court is every potential candidate in the election is really just trying to, bring, just put it in people's minds that guess what, this could happen. And we have come from two previous elections where people are very unhappy and we feel like things could have happened. I mean, we all have the famous Tharaka Nithi votes kind of thing. And that is what is at the forefront of everyone, whether it's the voter who really wants their candidate to win and is very scared that the opposing party might actually pull a Tharaka on them, or it is the candidate who's running who really wants to win and doesn't want to even possibly think that this could happen. So if you ask me, we're in court, they all even know what the court is probably going to rule based on what's going on in the constitution and everything. But the challenge is that we're creating awareness. I mean, the campaign period. To me, this is really a campaign gimmick where you're just working very hard to draw attention of your supporters to a possibility that our votes could be tampered with, or the other people could tamper with their votes to give them an added advantage, and we should be looking out for it.
But maybe, Julie, if you look at it, why maybe NASA is pushing that agenda, you remember that it's flag bearer. This is the fourth time he's giving a stab at presidency. He's under intense pressure, and he's been on record saying that he'll not again go to 2007. He says it was stolen. He went to the streets. It was catastrophic. 2013, he pursued the judiciary. Of course, he was told to accept and move on according to him. And therefore, he has said now he's trying a third alternative, and this could be his final stab. So perhaps that is the reason he says, because you remember that in 2007 we had that famous Nithi, Juja here and Kiambaa, that for 3 days the returning officers could not reach. In fact, the late Kivitwa one day he said that even if they were to come by foot, they would have reached KICC long time ago. And then he made a reckless statement that they are cooking those results, and eventually that is what the people came to hold him to account based on that statement. 2013, there is a clip that is going viral purporting that Tiaty constituency had 20,000 registered voters, 17 participated in the election. Then out of the 17,000, they said that somehow the president received 51,000. So that it is on that basis that perhaps the opposition thinks that this time round will not wait for whatever will be declared at Bomas, because whatever is proclaimed there is the final result. And that's why they want, as Ruko says, because the agent of IEBC at the grassroots of the constituency where the election is held will be the one who will be held accountable. And that's what NASA says. If there's a mistake in your constituency, individually you are the one who should carry that blame. It should not be transferred to the commission in Nairobi.
Okay, but Sharon, now that Duncan brings NASA into this
Yes.
equation,
Yes.
is this a political question or is this something for the courts to decide?
I feel that you have to look at things in terms of timing. Yeah. It just so happens that we're 61 days away from the election. The timing does not work in favor of the electorate. We cannot afford at this point in time to be having a court case. And like you said, this is, I do agree to some extent in the sense that this is a political question that is just clogging the system. I believe that it is clogging the system. And if I was to go back to your point in terms of looking at potentials for, if I may call it, ballot stuffing, just because it is at the county level does not mean that there will not be avenues for ballot stuffing, which brings me back to my first point, is that there needs to be measures in place. There needs to be measures that are put in place with regards to curbing this. Yeah. We cannot keep on regurgitating the same question over and over and over. We cannot come back to this question 5 years from now in 2022. So it is something that needs to be addressed in terms of the system, but not at this point in time, not in this atmosphere of anxiety.
Right.
Let me just say something.
Let me just we're remaining with matters and the goings-on at IEBC, and now the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission has fired Procurement Director Lawi Aura, accusing him of incompetence that, quote-unquote, made operations untenable ahead of the August general election. Now, Mr. Aura was blamed for delays in procuring the ballot papers, and he was shown the door just 2 days after a meeting resolved to send the agency's ICT director, James Muhati, on a 30-day compulsory leave. Mr. Muhati was sent on compulsory leave on May 27th following accusations that he had refused to cooperate in an ongoing audit of the voter register. Now, IEBC, we've talked about this before on this show. Yes. It has a lot of fits and starts. I think I'll start again with you. Because now the ballot papers are now in jeopardy, and the technological system that's supposed to ensure a free and fair vote is also seeming to have a bit of issues with both the bosses being sent away. What do you make of this? Is this malice or is this cleaning house?
There are those who say it could be some sort of malice at play. There are those who say this is the cleanup, that IEBC, that the current commission doesn't want to be blamed for anything. But even if it's a cleanup, you look at it, we are exactly 2 months. This is the election that has the highest number of candidates. And when it comes to printing a ballot paper, it's specifics. That is Julie Masiga. It has to be Julie Masiga, your proper picture and everything, every detail. There's no shortcut about it. So you fail to understand if by now they haven't been procured, then what time will they be procured? Then they verify whether it's the quantities that before they now embark on printing, because even if it's the cleanup, I think it's way too late, even though some will say the commissioners are only barely 4 months and maybe they've taken time to study the systems and now maybe they are sealing loopholes. So you can't tell exactly where it lies, whether it's sabotage, whether it's a cleanup.
Your thoughts on this, Sharon?
Yeah, so I'll go back to it. I'll say for starters that it's a good pointer for transparency when you have the IEBC, the institute that has the global eyes on it right now, have the audacity to do a cleanup this close to an election. Yeah, so to some regard, it's a good thing, but I still go back to the timing. I mean, like you've mentioned, you're looking at the most expensive elections that Kenya has. We're looking at we're looking to procure, get sources from a company that will print over 130 million ballot papers. I don't know how feasible that is. We're looking at a timeline that is very, very crucial. So when you look at it in the bigger picture, like I keep saying, is it a time to clean house, or is it a time to align yourself and say, yes, these are some of the issues? And I mean, if you go back to what was mentioned, I think they mentioned incompetency as one of the issues. Yeah, I mean, isn't it a little bit too late to be talking about incompetency? Because I believe an institute like that should be able to conduct the necessary due diligence on their clients, especially if you're dealing with a big position like a director of procurement. There is legislation in place. There's a Procurement Act that's in place that is supposed to direct all of this. So for me, I find that it is a win, a tick for transparency, but a loss in terms of timing. And right now, what Kenya does not have is timing, and what the IEBC does not have is timing, because they need to give us a credible election, a transparent election. Yeah, but on the back of it, they're working against a ticking time.
Aruka?
I think she She killed it. But I wanted to discuss a little bit about the issue of the case. And I want to talk about there's a Supreme Court ruling in regard to the Mathare by-election, rather Mathare election last time, when the returning officer announced somebody as the winner, but went back and said, no, you are not the winner, called back the results and handed over to somebody else. And the Supreme Court actually ruled that once you do that job, once you make an announcement, whether it's right or wrong, functus officio, the role has ended. It's not your duty to recall that. So that one answers your question about all the shenanigans going around the case in court, which I insist is a waste of time. And in regard to the issue of transparency, as he's saying, I want to disagree a little bit. That one, in my view, tendering and procurement is not a one-man job, isn't it? There's always a committee. There's always a group of people. Now, singling out one person, for me, is just a continuation of what she's talking about, clogging. It's a clog. It's a part of the small-time games, maybe, to explain something in future.
Well, they did say that there was an audit process on the procurement, and there was a report.
That's their story.
And the report said that there was incompetence in the procurement process. So is there such a thing as too late when it comes to transparency, fairness, and the rule of law, Dr. Neka?
But why?
Well, I think for me there is no such thing as a time. You know, when we can't say your time barred to announce this. You know, you'd rather go ahead. Okay, what basically is we have commissioners who are under a lot of pressure. You've walked into office, people expect you to deliver. They're living through a series of bungled elections where the blame has always come back to this office. And here you are saying we are the ones who really are going to change this narrative. And then one other thing that we don't appreciate much in our setup is that we have commissions. But the commissioners are the people who come and go. The people who keep house are the secretariat. And those people can mess you up. So we're sitting here having commissioners who just walked into office. They're dealing with a secretariat that was left by the outgoing office, the same outgoing office that has been accused of so many problems. And really, if they had a choice, they would have come in with their own. But they weren't given that option.
Actually, there is talk that what is at play is what you'd call a circus, but many are saying you might call it a circus, but in real sense it's a vicious war between the secretariat and the commissioners. Some are saying it's a war of tenders, who wants to win what tender. I remember the chicken gate, because at the end of it, I think the buck stops with the secretariat. That's why there was debate when they were saying that you can't hound the commissioners out. And they said there's a secretariat that runs day-to-day events. Now, we understand the CEO, of course, having been in place, having been found. There are things that he's not agreeing with this team. And, you know, this team is coming on board as a dream team. Right. They want to prove a point. There's a case study of 2007, a case study of 2013, and as Nelly says, this one perhaps wants to stand out. And therefore, in that aspect of commission versus secretariat, keeping each other in the check is now perhaps what could be detrimental at the end of the day, because as Sharon says, we don't have the luxury of time.
Right. So I guess time will tell who's going to win that particular battle. But to change gears completely, at least 8 people have died in Mombasa alone since the nurses downed their tools on Monday. The nurses say that they will only go back to work when a collective bargaining agreement is signed, but cracks have begun to appear as the Nurses Union officials differ in the legality of the strike. The Kenya National Union of Nurses Chair, John B., has disowned the strike, calling it illegal, and accusing Secretary General Seth Panyako of impeding the negotiations between the health workers and the Council of Governors. B. accused Panyako of being dishonest and calling for the strike in the middle of negotiations.
SRC makes a pronouncement on the matter. County governments will go ahead together with national government, will go ahead and sign a CBA with the Nurses Union.
The nurses strike is unfortunate, as this should have been prevented in good time. The strike has not only paralyzed essential services to Kenyans, but also, and very unfortunately, led to loss of lives and a lot of pain, frustrations, and suffering. SRC engaged with COG early in the year, in February 2017, when the first meeting with COG and the County Public Service Board was held, starting off the CBA process. at that point, and in consultation with COG, we provided the framework to guide in the negotiations.
So, Dr. Nelly, I think I'll start with you as a former chair of the Nairobi chapter of the Kenya Medical Practitioners and Dentists Union. This is a feeling of deja vu.
Yes.
It seems to be what happened to the doctors. Can you give us some insight into what might be happening here? Because everybody seems to have their own version of events.
Wow, I think, I mean, we have used the excuse for the longest time that devolution could possibly have been the worst thing that happened to health. Because people feel like devolution is what brought about all this industrial unrest that's leading to everything we're seeing. But unfortunately, it has just been mismanagement of health for the last 52 years. It's that basic. And here today, what we're saying is just a further reaffirmation that all these years down the line, we still continue to do the same thing. So if at this point we're still asking questions about legalities and illegalities of the strike, as a people, we have a problem. This is something we should have moved past. We've had a 100-day doctor's strike. We cannot possibly afford to be having a nurses' strike barely 3 months down the line. I don't know what is happening in the running of health in this country, but it does not matter what it needed to take. This should never have been allowed to happen. So if we're discussing illegalities, we need to look back at the managers of this sector. And that is the government. They are managing the public sector, and they have miserably failed.
So is it the government of Kenya, central government, or is it the county governments that should be intervening in this particular
There is nobody here who's escaping blame. These are things that have been raised before we even went into devolution. So when we start splitting hairs about whether it's national or county, everybody's failing. As much as we talk about devolution of health, we fail to actually realize that health is not fully devolved. It is partially devolved, okay? The counties have their responsibilities, the national government has their responsibility. The two have completely refused to meet where they share responsibilities. The national government has absolutely failed in the policy sector, because if it was addressing some of these problems, doing its mandate and saying, look, we set policy, we then disseminate this policy to counties, and we follow through to see that you're implementing these policies, we would not be here. One of the key reasons nurses will strike is overworking. A basic thing like that. You cannot have 4 nurses run a ward of 120 patients. So if there's supposed to be 15 nurses there, and the national government has a staffing norm, a document that's been in existence for many years, just ensuring that that document is enforced, the nurses would have nothing to strike about. Because yes, you'd want to get paid more, but then you look at what you're working and it really is not justified.
So, but Oruko, do you think it's more about working conditions, or is it about money? Because at the end of the day, if they don't get the money,
it's the same, one of the same thing.
Go back to work.
Because even if the two things met somewhere, the issue of compensation comes in, right? But my concern would be the role of the Salaries and Remuneration Commission. I think I have some basic understanding of industrial relations. I acted also as a unionist some times back. And I'm trying to understand the role of this commission. Because the idea of a CBA is legal, is well articulated, how to start negotiating from the beginning to the end, right? And now I do not know when they're negotiating whether CRC sits on that table. You know, or they just sit out there and wait to rubbish the whole thing and say there's no money, you know.
That's actually what has happened.
To me, that's the problem.
I think they're not saying there's no money. I think they said that they gave them a threshold beyond which they should not have passed, and they passed it.
Julie, let me tell you
negotiating
something.
here.
If I'm going to sit here, and my biggest problem with my employer has been my remuneration, the moment you give me an opportunity to negotiate for a CBA, I am definitely going to ask for what I think I'm worth. It is in no way going to be what the employer thinks is appropriate.
And that's also where the CRC comes in, because the CRC comes in to regulate how much you can ask
Here's
for.
where SRC is coming in, from a space where between me and my employer we have already agreed. Because by the time you take that document to SRC to go through and give it its input, it is done. Okay? You didn't wake up and say, he said 60, I said 100, and so we are not agreeing, so SRC tell us where to meet. No, you have agreed it's 80.
All right. Running out of time. Almost. Sharon, what are your thoughts on this?
Oh my gosh. So for me, it's a matter of looking at the overall picture, right? And the first thing I noted about this whole situation, like you said, it's deja vu, but it's also a situation of nobody wants to touch the whole coal. Nobody wants to touch the hot coal. The SRC does not want to touch it, you know. The union...
Right, I'll cut you off there,
Okay,
but we're still staying with what's happening with the
Yes.
nurses, because now the national and county governments are blaming the Salaries and Remuneration Commission for the latest crisis in the health sector. SRC has refused to approve the signing of a collective bargaining agreement that could have averted the ongoing national nurses strike. The CBA, which if implemented would cost the taxpayer over 30 billion shillings yearly, was arrived at after the nurses called off their strike last year.
SRC makes a pronouncement on the matter, county governments will go ahead, together with national government, will go ahead and sign a CBA with the nurses union.
Nurses strike is unfortunate, as this should have been prevented in good time. The strike has not only paralyzed essential services to Kenyans, but also, and very unfortunately, led to loss of lives and a lot of pain, frustrations, and suffering.
Right, we're talking about the SRC, and there it is. Sharon, you can continue with your comments.
Yeah, so no, I keep saying it's a case of either shifting goalposts or nobody wants to touch the coal. So for me, I keep on bringing it back to the environment, you know, the nurses strike. It's called a union for a reason. You have to be united. You're seeing a lot of disparity within the union itself, you know, meaning that the communication is not going the way it's supposed to go.
Right.
Now, I don't think that there will ever be an appropriate time for nurses to strike, because their strike results in death. And, you know, this is the ultimate result of the strike. Nurses are very crucial, but their plight can also not be put aside. It cannot be put aside because, as Nelly has talked about, the working conditions. You're working in an environment where there's a shortage of nurses. You know, you have your pay. I mean, you cannot buy food with morality because people are dying.
Or the Hippocratic Oath.
Exactly. That cannot buy you anything. You cannot convert that. So what happens to the nurses? But at the same time, you have to look at, if we bring in the morality question, the people who are suffering by virtue of this. And I put this to all the people who are not trying to touch the core, for them to find a solution. Yeah, in conjunction with the relevant parties, so the Canaan, the Nurses Union, in conjunction with the county government, in conjunction with the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, because we're losing our fellow Kenyans.
Okay, let's talk about the money for a second here, because Dr. Nelly, you talked about the SRC, and when you agree with your employer on a certain figure, that is a figure. But now the union is saying that the Council of Governors went to the SRC with a figure of 40 billion over 4 years, I think, whereas they had agreed on a figure of 30 billion. So what they want is an increment over a period of 4 years, which brings the increment to 7.25 billion Kenya shillings per year, which is an increase from 3.5 billion, which is not so much money. But in that whole confusion, the Council of Governors came up with their own 40 billion figure. The union is saying they have a 30 billion figure. So why is there so much confusion? And why are people thinking that this 40 billion is over 1 year when it's over 3 or 4 years?
Well, partly because of misinformation. The press did not handle the reporting of this strike correctly. We really must make that very categorical. People went out there and say, oh, another lot of... I mean, I saw the headlines in the papers today and I was
Can I even cut you short? Just read what she was reading.
I could not.
She has just even read and said it will cost the taxpayer 40 billion. So
I said 30 billion. I said 30 billion.
No,
and that's over 4 years, yes.
Why the issue of cost? We're talking about a service here, right? Why can we see a service that nurses are suffering and they deserve this?
Because
MCAs anyway are getting a lot of much more than this money.
Because it comes down, end of the day, bottom line is money. If they don't get the money, chances are they won't go back to work for a long time.
You know, I'm at a loss because we are dealing with the two authorities here. He's just confirmed he's a trade unionist. And you know, you don't retire once a trade unionist.
Always a trade unionist.
I'm a journalist.
And then you have a nurse who's participated in strikes and as they are putting a doctor. So they are part of the strikes. But I think on a serious note, it's sad that this country is being portrayed as a striking nation. Almost every day their strikes are taking place, and the most critical and sensitive sectors. Look at one of the dailies today. It was very straightforward that nurses are dancing on the streets, patients are dying. Just in one day, over 7 patients lost their lives. I mean, at the end of it, even if it's not that hypocritical oath that you took, how do you feel when you are not offering that service? And we saw the other day a lady wailing helplessly. They've walked in with their patient, nobody to help. I mean, there is just something bad, but that either we are losing our humanity, or simply we are typically in a man-eat-man society that you don't care so long as you're in a comfort zone. As the doctor says, these issues, they've been there for long. SRC, is it that with every strike they'll always be coming to say if their role, their mandate is to harmonize? Honestly, by now, for the time they've been in the office, they should have looked at every sector, every CBN place, and they should be the ones coming out and saying, this and this period, there was this negotiated thing, but we need to redo it. In that, we'd be averting such a crisis that we plunge ourselves in. But it looks like now you can't know where to place the blame. Is it the county government? Is it the national government? Is it that people don't care about lives anymore? Because it's unfortunate, but you understand the people who deliver that service need to be well remunerated, but again, people who require that service, they need to be attended to. So it's a very thin line.
I think
Right.
the first thing is there CBA. I want to believe there is, because even today, Parliament has approved some money through supplementary budget to go towards the CBA for doctors and nurses. Of course, it is a little at about 3 billion. But the role of SRC, do they sit in these negotiations? That's why we need to start it off.
Quickly, Aruka, we need to go to break. Those are your final comments on that?
Do they sit in these things?
All right, before we go to a break, we're asking you on our Twitter question should the presidential results be announced at the constituency level? Should the presidential election results be announced at the constituency level? You can tweet me at Julie Masiga, at KTN News. The hashtag, of course, is News Sources. Right now, we're going for a quick break. Don't go too far. We'll be right back.